We are live. Okay. Yeah. Just be careful with the questions you ask, please. It'll be recorded for posterity. So tonight's class, we're starting a 6-week series on different contemporary halachic issues, medical issues mostly. And today, it's absolutely a necessity to learn about these things because as the world goes at a very fast pace, tonight we all know there's a big election in America, right? So the world is moving very quickly. And I'm not going to ask you who you voted for, but we're not going to go there. But the important thing is that we realize that the world is now it's a very, very quick moving world, and a lot of the ethical issues, it's a slippery slope, and it's there are a lot of rulings and a lot of things that are happening in the world that are not necessarily totally consistent with our belief system. So I just want to say a few things at the outset, just to give you a few pointers, and that is that this class is medical ethics based on Torah. So I'm not telling you. I'm not going into the law of the land to tell you what's right or wrong. I just want to tell you what the Jewish perspective on all of it is. Okay. So that's such a very important caveat to realize. I'm not going to tell you, what Justin Trudeau should vote for, or Poilievre what he should vote for. That's not the thing. The thing is, I'm going to tell you what is the Jewish tradition. Where do we come from? And we come from 3,000 years of traditions and on all these ethical issues. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to find sources, the original sources within Torah, as to how to deal with many of the very, very complex and complicated issues. So the general law, as it is in Canada and most other countries today, is based mostly on human rights. The rights of people. Everybody has their rights, and a Torah perspective is a balance between the autonomy of rights and also a belief system that we believe in. We believe that there are certain rights and wrongs, and there are certain traditions that go back to the Torah, and a lot of what we do is to try to find a healthy balance. So that's what Torah does. Finds a healthy balance between rights and traditions and religion. So, for instance, in all the medical issues, one of the big issues is who makes a decision on our bodies, on ourselves, right? Like, does our body belong to us, right? So, the general notion out there is that everyone has their rights to make a decision. It's our body. It's my life, so I can do as I please. But Torah doesn't believe that. Torah believes that it's sort of a partnership with God. Right? God said, right, at the very beginning of creation, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and He said to man to be a partner in creation. So we believe that there's a partnership between us and God. And God gives us many, many rights, obviously within the system, but at the same time there's also an ownership of God. So that our body, we believe, doesn't belong to us. God gave it to us to deal with it properly, but it doesn't belong to us. So, for instance, when it comes to a question, the kids ask a question: Can we have a tattoo? Right? And there's always that tradition that if someone has a tattoo, they can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery. It's not true, by the way. We bury anyone and everyone, not everyone, but we bury any Jewish person in a Jewish cemetery, even if they have a tattoo. But the issue with tattoo is that that we, even though we have rights to do things on our body, but we can't we have a partner with us, right? That's Hashem. It's Hashem's body. He created the body. So we have to follow certain rules that He gave us. And if He told us not to tattoo ourselves, we shouldn't tattoo. So I shouldn't really say, because today there's so many people that tattoo. And in Israel, it's a real serious situation. It's really a serious industry. And again, I want to say, I don't stand in judgment of anybody. That's an important thing, especially in Chabad. We don't stand in judgment of anyone. And we have lots of people at the shul that have tattoos. we still accept them wholeheartedly, and they're well. Yeah. Don't show me a tattoo, please. Right. So the idea is that the body doesn't work. Same thing is also drugs and smoking and things like that. We're going to talk about that as well. That again is an issue. Is if you believe that the body belongs to yourself, then you could do as you please. But if we believe that it's a partnership with God, then God tells us, you shall guard your body and you shouldn't hurt your body. So even though it's our body, we can do it. People will say, it's my life. I remember in my house years ago when I was a kid, there was a man that used to come eat in our house, always lunch on Shabbos, and my younger brother. The old man that was in the house, he used to come. It was a regular guest in our house at Shabbos. He's sitting at the end of the table, and my father tells my brother to do something, and my brother says to my father, "It's my life." So this guy, he went ballistic at this old man over there. He said, my life. I've never heard of such a crazy thing. How can you say it's my life? That's what the young people today say. It's my life. It belongs to me, right? It's my life. So this person says, well, it's my life. I can ruin my liver. It's my liver. I can do with my liver as I please. Right? So Rabbi Plotkin has to be careful with his liver as well, right? The doctors are looking. No, Hashem gave us the liver, so we have to make sure that we take care of our liver, right? Huh?
Share the bottle.
Share the bottle. Okay, I don't know the bottle myself. So we have to be careful to make sure that we right. So the body. And this is a very, very important basis of the whole thing, and it ties into our subject today very, very neatly. The subject of euthanasia and the Canadian ruling about MAID. Now, someone just asked me, we're talking about MAID. So someone came to me and says, Rabbi, you're speaking today about the Jewish laws about a MAID? Like, what's...
I'll have one.
This person comes from South Africa, so they're worried. Like, we should. You can't have a MAID. Yeah. So those that don't know, MAID is an abbreviation for a Canadian law now, which is medical assistance in dying. Medical assistance in dying is MAID. Right, and we're going to get into that shortly about the Canadian laws which have come into place in the last couple of years, where doctors can assist people in their choice of ending their life when they're sick or whatever it is. And we'll talk a little bit more about it later. But this is an important aspect of the whole MAID subject is do we have autonomy on our body? Do we have the freedom to do with our body as we please? Or we have to take into consideration that the body doesn't just belong to us. And here comes the big question, which is already a question that's been asked for thousands of years, is like, what does the Torah think about suicide? And suicide is an important question. We all know that one of the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not murder. Right? We're not allowed to murder or kill. But in society, it's understood that you can't murder somebody because then your rights are infringing on someone else's rights. Right? So therefore, it's a logical thing that you can't go and murder someone else because then you're infringing on their human rights. Right, but when it comes to suicide, many people will say that it's your life, so you have autonomy, and if you decide to end it, you should be able to end it because it's yours. But again, here we come again to the same idea. The Torah does not believe that it's our life to end it. We have a partner in our life, which is God, and God says, Every minute of life is precious, and you can't end a life just like that. Although we know that there are precedents in Jewish teachings about different kings, Jewish kings that committed suicide. There's a famous king, King Saul, and we know that King Saul committed suicide at some point. Well, most people say that the reason why King Saul committed suicide was because for the greater honor of Israel, because he was afraid that if he would be captured by the enemies, by the Philistines, they would make a mockery out of him, and then it would bring a feeling of sadness and a feeling of the Jewish community would feel like they lost the war. So he rather than losing the war, he committed suicide. King Saul, he fell on his own sword. Some say because he was in great pain. There is one opinion that says it was because of the great pain that he was in, and that's why he committed suicide. And that's another part that we're going to speak about later, is that if there are allowances. But the first allowance that there is for suicide is, let's say, for the glory of Israel. And we know as Jews also that there are certain moral stands that we have to take, that we have to be prepared to die for, which is a form of suicide, right? If someone puts a gun to your head and says, kill someone, or else I will kill you, right? So the halacha is that you're supposed to rather die, and it's called an act of martyrdom. You'd rather die yourself than to kill someone else, right? The same thing is if they tell you, let's say, to rape somebody else or something like that, it's also the halacha that you rather die than to bring such dishonor and disgrace to another person. You rather take your life. And there are also many precedents in the Jewish community where, like Masada and other places where the enemy was surrounding the people and the people were afraid that either it could have been for the glory of Israel, or it might have been also in the war cases during the times of the Crusades. Many people they committed suicide rather than being forced into conversion. Okay, because another area where it says a person would rather die as a Jew is rather than become idolatrous and bow down to the idol. You rather die than bow down to the idol. So there were many precedent cases during the times of the Crusades where Jewish communities were found all to have committed suicide. There's a famous story in the Tower of London. The Tower of London. They found a whole group of Jews that were found that committed suicide rather to fall into the hands of the Crusades and then be forcefully converted to Christianity. Yeah, question.
If suicide is regarded like that, can you still bury them in a Jewish cemetery?
Okay, so years ago, it did say that if someone so suicide was considered a very, very grave sin. It's like I was trying to explain that the Torah says in the Ten Commandments, "Thou shalt not murder." The question is, can there be a murder on yourself, right? If you kill yourself, right, is that a form of murder? Because you're not infringing on someone else's rights, but you're taking away the life which you're snuffing out a life which was given to you by God. So you're both the murderer and the victim in the same person, right? So that's So I just want to say, so in Jewish law, suicide was considered a very, very grave sin, and if you'll give a look in the early writings, it says that a person who commits suicide should not be buried in the Jewish community, in the Jewish cemetery, to take away the honor of being buried in the Jewish cemetery from them, because they've done such a terrible sin, and also there should be no incentive for anyone else thinking to copy them to see how tragic it is. I just want to say something. But over the last couple of hundred years, most of the codifiers have come to the conclusion that someone who commits suicide mostly is usually it's mental illness in many cases, right? it's not just somebody that just deciding it's not worth living, and they have something with God, and they think life is not worth living. It's usually a case of some kind of a deep depression that the person goes into, and then they come to a point of suicide. So today we do bury most of the people that commit suicide. We do bury. There's a famous responsive from the Chassam Sofer about 250 years ago, where he writes that more than likely, while the person was hanging and about to die, more than likely they had regrets, and so they did tshuva. They repented while they were going through the suicide. And most people that commit suicide would have probably done tshuva, probably repented while they did it. So hence, we are very, very kind and generous to people that do commit suicide in these days. But if you look in the early writings of halacha, you would see that it says clearly that a suicide is not buried in the Jewish community. Yeah, go ahead.
My father died at the age of 36. My
Right.
grandmother had an absolute fit because he was buried near the gate, near the fence, right? But he wasn't the first one near. There was another spot before,
Right.
and the reason she was so, he had a heart attack at work.
Right.
The reason she was so upset is that she told us that people who commit suicide are buried near the
Right,
fence.
so people would think that right, especially since he died at a young age, that it would be misconstrued as that, right?
Yeah, but he wasn't the first one there.
Yeah.
It was the second one.
Right.
But is that? I mean, I believed everything she told me.
Generally that's where they used to bury people who committed suicide and some other serious sins. There would be a place just right outside the cemetery where they. It was in the cemetery,
Yeah,
right.
second spot.
Right. There's another consideration is a Kohen, a person who is a Kohen. So they usually bury them right by the edge because the family of the Kohen is not allowed to go into the cemetery. So many times they would bury a Kohen at the periphery of the cemetery so that the family can get access, because they're not allowed to otherwise go into the cemetery. You have to stay within 6 feet of a grave.
Because we heard about some of the hostage survivors who have now committed suicide.
Yeah. No, for sure. A case like that's for sure. That's PTSD. What's called PTSD. Yeah. So that's we're not talking about that. So let's just continue a little bit on this. So this is one very important point is the concept of life and that in Jewish law, preserving life is of the greatest order. It says a person should do everything in their power. If you save one person, it's like saving a whole world. We all know the famous things and so on and so on. So if you lose one person, it's like losing a whole world. So in Judaism, it says v'chai b'hem. It's about living, and life is of the highest order. So, but life, the question is, what is life? What is life? And there's an interesting Gemara, Talmud, piece of Talmud that speaks about it speaks about a long-term life or short-term life. Question is to save somebody, to have them to save their life, but then maybe they'll live 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. How much must a person go to that? So there's a question in the Gemara, which if you give a look at the last page over here, on your sheets over here, this is from the Talmud, in the back, right in the back. If you look at the back, you'll see it over there. It says, So the Gemara speaks about a building that collapsed, and there are people underneath, and it's Shabbos. So Shabbos, you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to go digging on Shabbos and breaking the observance of the Shabbos. But obviously, if there's a chance, even a doubt of a doubt, that you might save somebody, so of course you break the Shabbos. That's like in Israel now, all the religious soldiers, they all go to the army because to save a life, that's of the highest order. But what happens if there isn't a chance that the person will live, but maybe they'll live a few minutes? So do you break the Shabbos to save a person if they're just going to live a few minutes? So that's called chayisha. Life that's just momentarily. It's not a long-term life, but it's a very short-term life. The question is, what is the value of that life? So we know that saving a life is of the highest order, but what about saving a person for a couple of minutes, right? Is that also of the highest order? Okay, do you break everything in order to save a person? And that would be today. You have that question many times in the hospitals and all of that. Just to keep a person going for a few more minutes. Like, how far do you have to go to get the person to live just a few more minutes? And that's it's a big question in contemporary medical world. And you have somebody lying there, and you could save them for a few minutes. So in this Gemara it says, Mishnah in Yoma 85a, the Mishnah taught if they found them alive, they continue removing the debris. The Gemara is surprised at this. If they find them alive, it is obvious that they move their debris since it's saving a life. The Gemara answers, no. It is necessary to teach that one must desecrate the Shabbos for a sake, even if it is clear that you will live only a short while and will die soon after. Okay. So even a temporary life, you break the Shabbos just to save a person just for a couple of minutes. And one of the commentaries says because in those couple of minutes the person can repent, the person can have their last rites, the person can say good Shabbos. Life. There are mitzvahs you can do even in a couple of minutes. Sometimes I've had many times that I go into a hospital and a person is like on their deathbed and they're already everybody's given up hope on the person. And when the rabbi comes in, for some reason people wake up when rabbis come in. Not in shul, but not in shul. They go back to sleep. No, I've always had a question. I've always wondered why that's the case. When a rabbi comes into the hospital, the person, you go in, the doctor says, this person is totally out. There's no chance. The family says the person hasn't spoken in a few days. I walk in there and I find that the person, they wake up from it. It could be because they think they're somewhere else, and I'm greeting them in the other world, so they get the shock. Or they haven't seen the rabbi for so many years. What's the rabbi doing here now? Whatever the reason is, but many times I find they wake up and I say Shema Yisrael with them. I say Shema. I say just something, a small little prayer. Maybe I say to them Good Shabbos. I said tomorrow Shabbos. I say Good Shabbos to them, and there's a little, we don't really know what's the purpose of every minute of life, but there could be some little purpose that there is in somebody to live even just a few more minutes. Like someone explained that life is like an infinite thing. So what is the value of life? Is life valuable when it's a year or 2 years or 3 years? Is it, or a day or an hour or a minute? If life is valuable, life is a very, very important. So it's like an infinite thing. So if you cut infinity into little pieces, right? Every part of infinity is very, very valuable. Right? So that's an important thing to realize that the Jewish law speaks about even a small portion of life as being important and valuable.
What happens if you have a living will? A lot of people have living wills. They don't,
Well, look, we could talk about it a little bit later, but obviously we take into consideration the wishes of the deceased. You're talking about what the family should do when there's a living will? Or?
You yourself, if you want to have a living will, if something happens...
Yeah, we could talk a little bit about it later. There are different ways of going about a living will. And, there's do not resuscitate and all those kind of things. So those are, look, like I say, today there's a lot of questions, and that's why it's important to learn and to be more aware of these things, what to do and how to do it. And, okay, go ahead. You were saying?
I watched one of them.
Yeah.
I watched
my mother suffer,
Yeah.
like, especially in her final week. And I want to tell you something.
Yeah.
That if she had been able to have MAID at that time,
Mm.
and she had said it, we would have agreed to it. Because she suffered. She was so ill and in so much pain.
Yeah, but I just want you to know that we don't know the answer to everything, right? Obviously, and all these things. And sometimes we do things because we don't think it's right to do the other thing. You understand what I'm saying? So as a child, you could say that you'd like to end it. The question is it right to end it? That's you know what I mean. And as we'll talk about it, that there are different ways of going about it. MAID is quite a pretty proactive way of doing it, but there are. So we have it within. There's another important thing over here that we talk about, and that is that today, the end of life is very complicated. You know, years ago, people just died. And today, because of modern medicine, we're able to extend people's lives to go on and on and on. And then even to where we get to a point where a person, let's say, they're in a position of brain dead. You could put a person on a machine, and they could live for another, who knows how long they could live after that, right? So it's a very, very complicated world. And like I said, years ago, the way that you would know if somebody is passed away, you know, in the halacha it says that you would take a little piece of straw and put it by the nose, right? And if it moved, then you knew he was alive. If it didn't move, dead. They bury the person. That was it. It was very simple. Today, you have the respiratory, you have the cardiac, you have the brain, you have different levels of brain death. Yeah. And you want to ask something over there, Shana?
Like, was your armor says the tape, would that be like a form of suicide?
No, that's what I'm going to get to shortly. That's not necessarily a form of suicide in certain cases. We'll talk about that. So. Right, but let's first talk about, you know, what is the definition of death. So years ago, and as you can see over here in the halacha, like I'm just looking at the original Gemara, which was written 1,500 years ago, the original Talmud, right? So if you read over here, it says, how do you know? So it speaks about the same case, the building's collapsed, and you want to see if someone's alive. How do you know? So it says, the rabbis taught, if a person's buried under a collapsed building, until what point does one check to clarify whether the victim's still alive? Until what point is he allowed to continue clearing the debris? They said, one clears until the victim's nose. If there's no sign of life, i.e. if he's not breathing, he's certainly dead, right? And some say one clears until the victim's heart to check for the heartbeat, right? I'm just saying that's the way it was years ago. You check the nose to see if there's breathing. You check the heart to see if that was very, very simple. But today, within the last 40 years or so, there was the new definition of what death is. The Oxford Harvard the Harvard definition of what death is. It was not anymore defined by the cardiac, because you could put somebody on a machine and they could continue to. So what they said was that the definition is brain dead. And how do they measure that? They check if there's no response from the eyes and there's no and there are the different ways, the different tests they could put on the person to see that there's no more brain activity. And once there's no more brain activity, then the person is deemed as dead. That's become the popular definition of it, and that's an area that's pretty pretty and there's a few reasons. One reason is because they want to keep people living further. They're able to keep them living on by intubating the person and putting them on a heart on a ventilator. Yeah. And there's a lot of it that went on with during COVID-19 and all of that, right? So it's intubating the person there's a secondary issue, not just to be able to extend the life, but it's very important today to be able to do that so that you can harvest, they call it harvest organs, because the only way you can take a heart to save someone else's life, in the case of organ donors, is by keeping the heart going, and that way the person is completely dead in terms of the brain activity, but the body still needs to continue, and then they take the organ from the one person and put it to another person. I'm not going to that subject, but that's not very clear even within halacha today. You'll find rabbis that go both directions on this. Some rabbis will say that the only death is only if the heart stops beating, and there are another group of Orthodox rabbis that agree that if a person is brain dead, but completely brain dead, like, I'm not talking about just the upper brain, I'm talking about the brain stem that controls all the reflexes and everything like that, and it controls the respiratory. There are many rabbis that do hold that is considered dead, and that you are therefore you're allowed to give organs, to save another life, because if that person is dead, it's not like you're killing one person to save another person. I'm not going into that whole subject, but that's an important area for the subject of euthanasia, that if a person is in that condition, perhaps you might be allowed to pull the plug. But, my personal leaning is in the other direction. But I just want to say that there are many Orthodox rabbis who I respect, who go in a different direction, and they say that as long as the person is brain dead, then it's like a person is decapitated, and it's like a chicken. You ever saw a chicken after you cut off the head? It runs around, does all kinds of. I don't know if you've ever been by the kaporis and seen that, but that's a chicken. They have this expression, a chicken without a head. So a chicken without a head, it goes around and it's alive, but it's not alive, right? So that's the idea of brain dead. But so there might be more leniencies in terms of all these things in that circumstance when a person's already brain dead. You wanted to ask something, okay? So let's just move on a little bit. I just want to know, Rabbi Cohen, are you following me? Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay, I just want to make
Pretty
sure.
interesting so far.
Okay, I just want to.
Keep on going.
Rabbi, just one quick.
Yeah, quickie. Okay, quickie.
Yeah, going back to the Gemara, where you're talking about the story of
Right.
Beth and everything. I'm thinking of the story of Elisha,
Right.
who's called in, and apparently the young lad is dead.
Right. He brings him back to life.
He realizes if he breathes into him,
Right.
he can resuscitate.
CPR. Yeah.
Yeah, so even talking 3,000 years ago, the notion was still there.
Right. Well, in Jewish law, when a person passes away, and even when everything stops, I'm talking about the head, the brain dead, the heart, everything. You still have to wait a little bit afterwards, just to be 100% sure. they're not coming back. Years ago, they used to wait a couple of days. It used to be in the law in many countries that you had to wait a few days. Because they were concerned that somebody will wake up underneath. There were people who used to have like bells. They used to have. I had once a fellow that wanted to be cremated. So I asked him why did he decide to be cremated? Jewish laws, you're supposed to be buried. So he told me that he was concerned that he was afraid that he would wake up if he's buried. He'd wake up underneath and try getting out. So Hashem gave me a good explanation. I said to him, I'd rather wake up under the ground than wake up on the conveyor belt into the crematorium. As a Jew, you don't want to be caught going into that. Right? Anyways, so I said I'd rather have that, but the halach actually is. That's why we always wait about a half an hour to an hour afterwards, and only then do I tell the family to close the eyes and to cover the body and to wait a little bit, because, like you say, there is a small possibility of like a reversal. It's not likely, but there have been some, but definitely not 2 or 3 days. There are many cases of people, divers, that have a long period of time afterwards. But that's because they go into shock, and then I forget what it's called, diver or something. It's called, huh?
The bends. The bends.
Yeah.
Mit Nitrous oxide in there.
Yeah. So that's the. So let's go like to more practical things about, and that was the question before about DNR and do not resuscitate and all these different things that we might ask of ourselves or in the living will or of the family, etc. So before MAID came around, there was a thing they used to call it euthanasia. Okay, that was a big thing. It's called mercy killings, euthanasia, right? It comes from the word mercy killings. Whenever they say euthanasia, people say, "What about the youth in Africa?" And they don't know why the euthanasia. But euthanasia is the concept that we should be merciful to a person that's dying, and even the Torah says "B'rayr loy misa yafa." You should choose a good death, right? And that was always even with in the time that there was the death penalty years ago. They used to say that love your fellow like yourself, to try even a person that has to die when the death penalty was around, to try to find as humane a death penalty as possible, if there is such a thing, right? So there is such a thing as a mercy killing, but if you go back in Jewish law, like I said, everything in Jewish law is based on precedent. It's based on our history. It's based on what the Torah law is. So there's a section of the Talmud which I have here, but I'm just going to tell it to you. But it's on the front page. I mean, you can look at it afterwards at great length. But you know, the Jewish people went through a lot. On Yom Kippur, we always read a section that's called the martyr service. The martyr service. And in fact, our mechitza, actually, we're on the wrong side of the mechitza, but on the men's side of the mechitza, you'll see over there, there's all these like Hebrew letters. And it's based on a particular story of the martyr service that took place. There were 10 martyrs, including Rabbi Akiva, was the most famous one, whom the Romans, they raked the skin off, and he said, Shema Yisrael. But there was another rabbi whose name was Rabbi Hananya ben Tradian. Hananya ben Tradian was a very, very famous rabbi who went around at the times of the Romans, and he was teaching children Torah. And they caught him, and his friends told him, you shouldn't put your life at risk, and he felt that, the future of the Jewish people is at stake over here. So I'm going to continue to teach the Jewish children, the students, even in these difficult times. You see how important education was to the Jews at all times. So he wouldn't give up. So what did they do, the Romans? The Romans had a good imagination. They brought him to the town square in front of everyone. They grabbed the rabbi, and they brought out a Torah scroll, and they wrapped the rabbi in a Torah scroll. Right? And they, the story there, right? And they set him on fire. And as he was dying, his students asked him, I guess they had a little conversation. I don't know when they had the time to have the conversation, but they asked him, Rabbi, what do you see? He says, I see the parchment of the Torah is burning, but the letters are flying up to the sky. The letters are not being burnt there. And that's why the picture on the other side of the thing, you'll see over there, it's called the flying letters. It's imagery. It's imagery of great artists. That in Judaism, even when they try to burn our bodies, our traditions and our beliefs never stop. They never give up. They continue to go from one generation to the next. So even if any particular person, even after the 10-7, what went on over there, right, for the Jewish people, we don't give up. We continue to pass it on from generation to generation, and we have these amazing Hebrew letters that continue to fly on one generation. So the students asked the rabbi, can we increase the flames? Can we end it for you faster? You're burning already anyways to death, right? You're moribund, you're already on your deathbed over here. Can we get the fire going a little? He said, no. He said, no, I'm sorry. They asked him also, Rabbi, maybe open your mouth so that the fumes will kill you faster. He says, no. It says, God wants to take me, he'll take me when he wants to take me. I will not open my mouth and allow myself to die, not even for one moment earlier. The Gemara continues over there. It says the executioner was speaking to the rabbi. There's a little conversation with the executioner. The executioner says, and what if, Rabbi, can I take off from you your clothes? They put woolen tufts, wet woolen tufts on him, so that he should suffer more, right? So that the fire shouldn't get to him quickly. So he says, so the executioner, who's a nice fellow, he turned to the rabbi, he says, if I take off the woolen tufts, will you promise me the world to come? You know, they're all worried about this executioner of the Romans. He's worried about the world to come. So the rabbi says, yes, that you can do. You can take off the woolen tufts. So what's the difference? What's the difference between opening up his mouth, the rabbi, and swallowing the flames and dying a moment earlier, or removing the woolen tufts that's holding back the flames from burning him up faster? What would you say is the difference? The difference is, and that's what most of the commentaries explain, it's the difference between active euthanasia and passive euthanasia. And this is the foundation. This piece of the Talmud it became the foundational piece of all future halachic authorities as drawing a difference between actively doing something to take someone's life faster, or just removing some of the treatments or the medicines or the other things which are holding back the person from dying when they are in this mode of when they are already in the throes of death. So when you're already in the throes of death, you're already on the bed and you're going a day or two or three, whatever it is, right? So there is a distinct difference which is based on this piece of the Talmud, and that's why it's nice that you see it coming from way back when, that the rabbi would not do anything to die a minute earlier, but he would do things to take away some of the treatment or take away some of the... and this became the basis of an important, very important difference, which is a consensus in Jewish law, that active euthanasia is forbidden, and some forms of passive euthanasia are allowed.
So then pulling the plug.
Okay. Yeah, right. So you asked a question about pulling the plug. So the question is, what is pulling the plug? Tell the story of the pulling plug. There was once a hospital, famous hospital, where I think it was somewhere in England, where every weekend they found out there were more people that were dying. They were trying to figure out why on the weekends people were dying. So they thought maybe it was the doctors who were out of town or whatever. Then they found out, they did some research, they had some cameras in the room, and they found out in the emergency room, they found out that the cleaner would come in over there, and he would have to get to the corner there near the plugs. So he would pull the plug out for a little bit and then put it back in because it was in the way, right? So it's like my office over here in the shul. Always they're always ripping up my plugs and everything, and it's. Anyways, okay, that's just a joke. It's not a real story. It's a story. But question. But that's a question. The question is, and that's one of the big questions: is pulling the plug. Is pulling the plug active or is it passive? Now, most rabbis say actually that it is active because you're doing like you're. So in other words, before you get onto the plug, if you want to intubate. Think about the extubating. You know what I mean? Like just before you get onto it, don't think about that. Because pulling the plug is an interesting. Now there are some doctors will tell you they just have to clear it up a little bit. Take it out a little bit, and then we'll see. But everyone knows that once you pull the plug, it could be an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe a day, and it's as they say in Yiddish, ois yontif. So whatever, that's what it is. But that would be considered a form of most halachic authorities say that it's a form of active, not passive. Now, passive would be before fancy medicine came around, about 400 years ago. Some of you might have been in Krakow. Anybody here ever visit Poland? Anybody else? So Krakow is right next to Auschwitz over there, right? We were there together actually in Krakow, right? So we went to a shul, it's called the Ramah Shul. The Ramah was one of the famous halachic authorities of his time. He was the co-author of the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. The Code of Jewish Law was written by Joseph Caro, who brought together all these Gemaras and everything that was brought in halacha up until about 500 years ago. And he wrote the Sephardic point of view, and then there were the Ashkenazic Jews, that was the Ramah. He writes, like, he has glosses on the Shulchan Aruch, which became an integral part of the Code of Jewish Law. And the Code of Jewish Law is about 500 years old, right? So in the Code of Jewish Law, he speaks about the difference between the act of euthanasia, the active involvement in ending the life for a person who is at that very, very last stages, and the passive. And the examples he gives over there is that in those days, there wasn't a lot of active and passive. But the example he gives over there is that if let's say there's a wood chopper outside that's chopping the wood and making a lot of noise, and that's keeping the person alive, right? So you're allowed to remove the wood chopper, get him away, so that way the external thing that's keeping him alive will be removed. Or if there's something under the pillow, in the olden days they used to have something under the pillow. They used to put some smelling salts or something like that to keep the person alive from the fumes of the smelling salts, whatever, right? So he says if you take those out, that's also a form of passive, because you're not doing anything. You're just taking away an external thing that's. There is also an idea about prayers. To ask Hashem that someone should pass away when they're in that very, very difficult situation. So there's also the sections that say that you're allowed to do that as well, because that's not even though we believe in our prayers, but that's not a direct killing the person. It's just taking away. It's like not praying, not stopping to say Tillim that they should live. That was considered an acceptable thing in certain circumstances where the person is just continued suffering. Now so we didn't get to the big crux of the question is how do we balance all these things together? And this is where you need to have some great wisdom. And every day I get these questions and people ask me, Rabbi, what do you think? And usually they do the opposite. But I don't. But people want to hear what the rabbi has to say about these things, and it's a very hard balance, when you see a loved one that's like you mentioned before over there, that they're suffering and they're dying and they're bored. And now the Torah obviously is not a cruel book. It's God. Hashem doesn't want people to suffer. In fact, there is an interesting halacha that says there. If let's say you could save someone's life, you have to do whatever you can to save them. But let's say you have to give up your a bodily part to save someone else. Is that mandatory? Do you have to go and give up your arm, or give up your foot, or give up your finger to save someone else's life? If that's going to save someone else's life, so the halacha is. Torah is not it's not asking you to do things heroics. It's not asking you to do crazy things. I mean, you have to do whatever you can, and it probably would be considered beyond the letter of the law, and it's considered something great if you did it. But there's no law that you have to do it.
But isn't that like giving a kidney?
Right, exactly. That's it. So you don't have to give a kidney. If you give, it's considered a great mitzvah, and you're a hero. But it's not demanded of you. You have to understand, there's a difference between things which are the law and things which are beyond the letter. So if you have a kidney and you could save someone's life, and you feel you're worried that you might need that second kidney for whatever reason one day, if the first kidney fails, it's not unreasonable to say, I don't want to give it. But it's a beautiful thing. If you do give it, you're like the champion, right? It's like the people that go to war in Israel. I mean, they're the champions. But do I want to tell my kid here to go? You know what I mean? Go to Israel. If they do it, that's great. And then my nephew's going there. Like he's just finishing his training there in Israel. And his parents are going crazy about it. And it's incredible. It's an incredible mitzvah. But you can't tell your kids you got to go to Israel and join the army. I mean, there are things that you have to do and things that. So I'm just saying that the Torah is a reasonable book. It's a book that tells you you don't have to suffer. It's not asking for you a life of suffering. So here come the two very important things that collide over here. We say that the body doesn't belong to us. Every minute of life is precious. But at the same time, suffering is a real issue. Suffering is a real issue. It's not something that just to be taken lightly. Someone's in pain. You have to deal with it. So here we have sort of a bit of a compromise that we just said here. One thing was whether it's active euthanasia or passive euthanasia. We just discussed that. So that could be. So the question is, what is passive euthanasia? Now, a lot of times you go to the hospital, they tell you like, let's stop everything. We're going to be very passive, right? We're not going to give the person to eat or to drink, or to you give him food, or they're diabetic, stop giving them diabetes medicine. That could be one form of passive euthanasia, right? But the halacha says even if we do believe in passive euthanasia, you still have to give the person just their basic needs. You can't take away from them, Sometimes the doctor will say that giving the person, in certain cases, giving the person to fluids can make them drown in their own fluid. You know what I'm saying? When the kidneys are not working or whatever. So every case has to be judged individually. Obviously, it's not a one for all. But as a general principle, even if we do believe in passive euthanasia, that's about doing heroical stuff. So let's say somebody comes here and says, Rabbi, I don't want to do chemotherapy. The doctor tells me, if you're gonna do, in most cases it's actually pretty close to that. They tell you if you don't do chemotherapy, you'll live 6 months, and if you do chemotherapy, you'll live maybe a year or something like that. And we're not even sure. We can't even guarantee that. That's usually what the kind of things that you get all that, right? So does a person have a right to say, I don't want to go into extended suffering? And that's where it's a form of passive, not to do. Now, there are certain cases that are clear cut. And one of them might be, let's say, if a person, is riddled with cancer, and they're dying, and they're the throes of death, mamish, they're dying over there, and then they get a heart attack, right? And then the doctors come with the paddle boards over there, and they try bringing the person back to life. So that's where we asked about DNR, do not resuscitate. In a case like that, I would recommend the do not resuscitate, because they're dying anyways. Why are you gonna break all their ribs? And then in most cases they die in a few hours later anyways, right? So those are the kind of cases where that's a passive euthanasia, where you don't resuscitate the person, and you're not doing what they call heroics. So one doesn't have to, but then there are more subtle cases, more subtle cases, like I mentioned before. One case was about whether you can refuse the treatment. Now, but while I'm saying this whole thing, I just want to point out that if a person can take a risky surgery, which is another similar sort of question, a risky surgery that the person might die on the table, but they might actually change their terrible situation where they're going to live maybe a month or two, and they might actually cure themselves and then live a full, healthy life. The Torah actually encourages that. It encourages for a person to take a risky surgery when let's say you're going to live maybe another month or two with what you have now, but the doctor says there's a possibility you might be able to heal yourself and then live with another 5, 10, 15 years if you take the surgery. So that actually is something which is encouraged. Some say that you have to say that it's 51%, chance that it'll work, and others say no. Even a very risky surgery is also acceptable because you're gonna move from the chayesha, which is the temporary life, to a more permanent living condition. So that's I'm giving you a lot of thoughts. No one should finalize anything based on what we're saying here. But I'm just giving you the whole scope of all of the knowledge. Now, yeah, go ahead.
Rabbi, just on that point,
Yeah.
There's a question of intent. When you're taking the risky surgery,
Go ahead.
your intent is to live.
Live, exactly. Correct.
So it's not.
That's
to kill yourself.
exactly the point. That's exactly. It's not a suicide for sure.
Yeah.
Right? That's right. Sure.
Rabbi?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I have a friend who she's already passed away, but her choice was rather than to live a longer time and not be able to do anything, to take the medications that will allow her to live a full life as long as she's living.
No, yeah. Well, the halacha is that you have to try to live as long as you can, but if it's going to be a life of just suffering,
That's what, yeah.
That's an area where there's autonomy. That choice, there is autonomy. Like we don't have autonomy to end a life, right, or to commit suicide, but we have autonomy to choose those kind of things, to choose whether or not we're going to.
She didn't want to be bedridden. She wanted to be
Right.
able
She wanted to have a
go
quality of
to
life.
friends.
She wanted to have a quality of life for maybe
Right.
a little bit of a shorter period of time. That is a choice that can be made, but it should be done. Just generally, it's always good to speak to somebody like a rabbi or somebody to.
Well, I'm sure she did,
yeah,
but,
yeah. But now let's go to the issue of the MAID. This is what the class is about. So MAID is a new law that allows not just active euthanasia, but it's actually more. It's more than that. I mean, it's not just for people who are on the last minutes of their life, but it's people who have a lot of pain and suffering, and there are many conditions that are like that, and so the Canadian government has now passed a law last 4 or 5 years or whatever it is, that the doctor can come and assist the person and they're dying through medications, and it's like within a couple of hours the person passes away. And it's quite an aggressive thing. And like I said, from the Torah perspective, it's totally not allowed. It's totally not allowed because active euthanasia, not just active euthanasia, but it's actually and they do it not just for a person who's right at the very last moments of life, but I had an interesting story about MAID. I had somebody from the Chevre Kadisha, from the society, and they work with one of the funeral homes. So they were called to a home to pick up. This person's job is to go pick up bodies, if the people pass away, to bring him to the burial. So he goes to his house and he thinks he's going to find like a dead person there, right? So he comes in over there. He sees a lady there, all dressed up beautifully and in her finest makeup and everything, and old lady sitting there in the middle of the room. And he says, "I'm here from the funeral home. Who am I picking up?" She says, "You're here already from the funeral home. The doctor hasn't arrived yet." The doctor hasn't arrived yet. So she says, "Just stick around." She starts shouting at her children. Says, hasn't the doctor come yet? He was supposed to be here already. I'm waiting for him." Anyways, so the doctor arrived, and the guy from the funeral home says, "I'm leaving," and he went back to the funeral home. And a few hours later, he returned to take that beautiful lady who was all dressed up and everything, like she prepared herself for the MAID. For the ride. I thought it's a bit of a comical story, but it's not so comical. This is what we're talking about. By the way, in 2022, if you look online, I saw 4 to 5% of all deaths are through MAID. That was and it grew from 2021 to 2022 by 32%. So that means that probably now, I don't know, maybe like 10% of the people or maybe 8% are going with this program. So it's a serious program that's out there, and it's complicated. I mean, no one needs to administer that. It's your free choice to do it or not. But there are a lot of doctors who find it to be against their beliefs, And I mean the law is, I looked it up a little bit. The law is now that they don't need to, obviously they don't need to administer themselves, and they don't even need to give a referral, because that's what usually you need, a referral to a doctor that would do this. And if you don't believe in it, you wouldn't believe in doing the referral either. So the person has to go to some other doctor who will give the referral. But you will not lose a license if you don't give the referral. And I just wanted to ask something. Yeah.
Who makes up the decision to do this? Especially now with dementia so exacerbated in society, who decides at that point whether they want to take advantage, so-called, of
The person themselves. The person himself has to decide that. They have to sign off on it, and they have to sign off right before, unless they have some other. Yeah, go ahead. What?
If they're demented already,
You can't. Yeah, they can't do it. You can't do it if you dementia. However, up until this point, for mental health reasons, if someone said, I have a mental health condition, and I want to take my life because of that, it's not allowed. But starting, I think, in March, you'll be able to do MAID just based on if you have a mental health condition. You'll be able to. But if you're not of sound mind, you cannot do it. And you have to sign off. Apparently, you have to sign off like right before the doctors that come and say do you want like last minute.
somebody picks your hand up.
there's an advance direct.
Huh?
In Quebec.
Quebec, yeah.
Yes.
Quebec has just brought in a law that you can sign now.
Advance
So
direct.
that if for later.
For later on too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The government is not going to find.
Yeah. So this is a very serious thing, and it's quite a, like I say, it's contrary to our belief system. According to Jewish law, there's obviously there are numerous cases where I said there is some wiggle room, but here there's no wiggle room at all. Now, as far as just like I got to you in a second, as far as the doctors are concerned, when we were talking about here, it's MAID is medical assisted assistance in death. So that means we're speaking about the doctor, the doctor helping out the person in organizing their demise. Obviously, in Jewish law, different than many of the other religions, we believe that a doctor has a mitzvah to save a person's life, and a doctor can intervene. And unlike, so there's many other religions like like the witnesses or many others, where they say that if a person, let's say, needs a blood transfusion, you're not allowed to give the person the blood transfusion. They have to pass away. In Jewish life, a doctor's job is to help the person, but at the same time, the doctor's job is just to cure the person, save the person, not to facilitate that. And even when they're involved in hospice and in dealing with all kinds of palliative care, it's all about helping the person, and it's not about facilitating death. It's about trying to help the person in that process. But now it's suddenly become where they're asking of the doctors to go a step further, Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just thinking, we're sitting here as Jews, looking at this from the point of view of Torah, and I'm wondering if the main reason we're sitting here is discussing this is because we've become a secular society. Jews, Christians, Muslims, I can't speak for Hindu, whatever, I don't know, but essentially, when everybody adhered, if you like, more to their religion, these questions didn't even.
They were not questions at all. That's what I said at the very, very beginning. If you're just basing things on the human rights thing, and everybody's autonomous, and you could do whatever you want to yourself. That's the very very secular belief, right? So I said, you can't argue with that. If you don't believe in a God, you don't believe in any that there's any purpose in life, and the only thing that counts is to protect the people's rights. So it's a person's right to die, right? But we don't believe that. We believe, like I said, that we work with a moral system. We believe in that we have a God, and we need to the body and the soul that He gave us, we need to treat in the way that He feels is proper. So, our belief is that even one more minute in life, another mitzvah, another little bit is very very essential. But at the same time, I just want to say, going back to what I said before, there are certain circumstances and cases and things where things are done when the person's in great suffering, and there's no mitzvah to put a person into a situation of greater suffering, or to put a person in a place where they will not be able to retract and be able to live a normal, happy life. Yeah, right.
I just did a first aid course 3 days ago, and by law, you have to ask, if the person is conscious, you have to ask them for consent to help them. So if someone's choking or having a heart attack, if they don't give you consent, halachically, you should help them anyway, even though according to Canadian law.
Jewish laws, you have to go and save a life. You dive into it, right? But I understand, like I say, but it is a problem because go ask a person when you give me consent. Would you like to sign over here if you want CPR?
Will you visit me in jail?
Exactly.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
there was a discussion on the radio the other day,
Yeah.
and somebody who has Alzheimer's decided he wanted an advance directive, and the state at which he didn't want to go further is if he could not look after himself for his bodily functions, and if somebody had to, very far from the end.
Right, exactly.
And this man
Exactly.
was very lucid and very well spoken.
Of course. It's
I'm talking about the person who wanted to kill himself.
right. The person himself, right? So there is a big difference between someone going into that deep tunnel of Alzheimer's or the deep tunnel of many things like ALS and other things and Parkinson's and all of that, and someone that's lying in the last moments of life, like at the very very end. There's a big difference between those two circumstances. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
So just to give some more medical perspective
Go ahead.
on this. So the law.
Are you saying that until now it wasn't a medical perspective? It's okay. I'm a rabbi. I'm a rabbi that wants to be a doctor.
A doctor wants to be a rabbi. So medically, there has to be a reasonable expectation that death is near or
imminent.
coming. There's no set timeline.
Right.
So the aspect of being able to predict the future, that if I have such condition but I'm not near death, that may be coming soon, depending on law amendments.
Right.
The mental health issue has been delayed a further year,
right.
2026,
Right.
because the psychiatry associations have objected that there's no set rules yet that are clear enough to be able to create the guidelines. And the whole wording of the word "MAID" is just a notion of softening the euthanasia term to say that it's medical, so they amended the criminal code of Canada to allow doctors and nurses to administer the injection. And as you remember, 3-4 years ago when I contacted yourself and Rabbi Morrison, because the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada was creating this new policy on MAID. And you directed me to the Toronto Board of Rabbis, who Rabbi Haber, created a beautiful piece to submit to the college, but they got around it. So in the policy for medical assisted dying of the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada that governs licensed doctors, they didn't address the issue at all of conscientious objection. What they did was they put it in a general policy regarding access to medical care, because now MAID is considered a medical service.
Right.
So they put it in there that you have to allow access to the care. So it doesn't.
It's not very clear.
So it's not very
In other words,
clear.
conscientious objection is not specifically on MAID.
It sounds like you
Right.
still have to
Right.
do the referral,
Right.
but I don't think there's been any cases
Not yet.
disciplined
Yeah.
for the college to make that decision quite yet.
So you still have your license.
So I
That's
still
good.
have my license.
Okay. Anyways, a lot of people told me they want to see the Trump show tonight. So we're going to end the class now. Next week we continue on next week's topic. I believe is on another topic that's very, very hot in America about abortion and when life begins. All right. So we're gonna talk to that. So it's a little bit happier because we're talking about the beginning of life and not the end of life. Okay, full cycle. Okay, so to be continued, Mr. Shem, next week.
Thank you.
I hope you guys enjoyed it. There's a round of applause.
Questions for the
Thank you. I have no idea how to shut this. Does anyone know how to shut this thing?